What's up, guys? It's me, Coach Mills, and today we're going to be breaking down the new Overwatch Season 2 tier list with a lot of the changes, community perception, streamers and pros trying out the new characters, and all the buffs and nerfs live. We can tell you exactly what characters are going to be the most dominant or the weakest this meta, so you're going to want to stay tuned. But I really want to say a special thank you to each and every one of you for supporting my channel. Some of you already know, but a couple of days ago, I got fired from my full-time job. But the fact is, I am going to be okay because of y'all. When I started making content about 2 months ago, I never thought we would get this far, and now we're over 40,000 subscribers. So I just want to take this time to thank y'all. I really appreciate it. Whether you're someone that has been part of my channel for a while, or this is the first time seeing my video, I just want to thank y'all. I really mean it. Okay, enough stappy stuff. Let's start off like we do every tier list with the tanks, because tanks build the meta, the foundation. So you want to know exactly what tanks are good before we know what DPS and supports are good. So let's start off with the S tier tanks, and the three in the S tier this season is going to be Roadhog, Winston, and Doomfist. You heard me right. It's freaking Doomfist. And if you don't know why, that's because you didn't see my patch notes video where Doomfist is just completely juiced to the gills. Like, it's insane. And every single player that have tried Doomfist and have played him, they got invited to the Blizzard pre-test. They have been saying how dominant this character is. And when we look at the numbers, Doomfist is just insane. He's going to be an absolute menace, capable of getting picks, capable of brawling on the front line. And yeah, you're going to really see just Doomfist kind of flourish right now. And supports, you're going to have a pretty rough time up against Doomfist. Yeah, it's going to be a bit miserable. I'm not going to lie with you. But there are ways to play around Doomfist, and I'll get to that when we get to the support section. But Roadhog is a tank that's still going to be S tier. And the Doomfist versus Roadhog matchup is going to be pretty common. It's going to be like a Roadhog and a Doomfist existing, Doomfist creating space and playing around the Roadhog, Roadhog trying to shut down the Doomfist, and it's going to be like, does the Roadhog hit enough hooks? Does he actually generate enough value? Does the Doomfist disrupt enough, make enough plays? It's going to be a really interesting matchup, and expect to see this fight go on quite a lot. And the third tank in the S tier is actually going to be Winston. Winston is still going to be really great. Designated dive, I mean, being able to jump on supports, isolate them with bubble, have your DPS there, finish off kills, that is still really strong. Winston is still really great for killing DPS. He's a lot better at peeling than someone like Doomfist is. And really, these three tanks are going to be at the top of the meta, but there are a second tier of characters that are kind of right under the surface that we'll see a lot of play as well. Specifically, first in the A tier, Sigma and D.Va. Sigma is going to be fantastic for poking a lot, being able to just poke, not get punished as much, for just having a shield out there that Sojourn can farm. And on some maps, poke is actually really strong, like Junkertown, and I do imagine Sigma still being very good, although he is a bit of a dog to Doomfist, although there's ways to play around it, and if you have a team back you up, I think in the right composition, Sigma is still very good. And then D.Va's still the peel god. Unfortunately, she has a pretty bad matchup against Doomfist, but she has a good matchup against Winston and Roadhog. And in addition to that, she has good matchups against a lot of the hit scan characters in the game. So when we have characters that want to come in and burst or do long distance damage, let's say Ashe or Tracer or Reaper, D.Va's really good against those characters. So I think her matchup against the DPS is good enough that keeps her high up in the A tier. And then last up at the bottom of the A tier, kind of on the line with A and B, is Reinhardt. Reinhardt's still a really great character on some maps where you can take the fight up close and personal. I will say, though, if you're going to play Rein, you really need a Lucio to help you get in and brawl, and make sure that you're not taking a fight at too far of a distance with your opponent. You want to have full cooldowns. You want to navigate around the map, wait for your cooldowns to be up, wait for your health and shield to be up, and then engage close rather than trying to get to an enemy and force your way through, push through open space too much and die. Now, I will say, though, that your matchup against Doomfist is pretty poor on Rein. It can be really bad. So if you're up against the Doomfist, oftentimes Rein will be really a character you want to swap off against the Doomfist. But if you're not up against the Doomfist, I think you can get value on certain maps. Now, next up in the B tier, we have two characters, Junker Queen and Orisa. Junker Queen is getting buffs. It's unclear exactly how much it will affect her in the long term, but there's so many powerful options that just do really great things that Junker Queen is going to get a bit overshadowed, although I don't think she's going to be anywhere near the throw pick that she was before. She's still going to be powerful. She's going to have a high carry potential, and I'm actually really excited for one day when we get a Junker Queen meta, but this season is not that season. Next up is Orisa. Orisa's a great brawl character. character. She's actually not that bad against Doomfist, being able to neutralize a lot of what he's doing and actually spear him through his block. I actually think that if you're someone that loves Rhine and you're getting bullied, you could swap to Orisa and do all right against the Doomfist. And Orisa's great at brawling, but unfortunately, Orisa doesn't do as much proactive things as Doomfist, Roadhog, Winston. But Orisa at brawling is unlike almost anything else and is really, really strong. The next up we have Zarya, and the developers actually have already stated that Zarya is performing a bit under what she should and is a character that probably needs buffs to compensate how far she's fallen. I understand that a lot of people are like, no, we don't want Zarya in the meta at all because she was too strong for too long. But yeah, Zarya I think is still really good if you could generate high charge, play around your team, have enough support from your team. But as a solo carry god, not so much anymore. But being able to enable certain DPS characters, like specifically Reaper, bubbling him in, getting extra value that way, can make Zarya still a really great pick. And then in the C tier, these are characters that are still a bit on the fence or powerful in only certain situations. Wrecking Ball, which is a character that I think is actually pretty strong. And you're like, if you think he's so strong, why is he all the way down in the C tier? Well, it's just because there are characters that do what Wrecking Ball can do, but a bit better. Winston and Doomfist are a bit better than the disruption of Wrecking Ball. Still, if you learn to master Wrecking Ball, I think you can get a ton of value, but that's the same with Doomfist and Winston as well. But like, if your specialty resides in Wrecking Ball, I don't think that the difference is so great that you shouldn't be playing Wrecking Ball. I think he's still really, really strong, and there's not a lot of counters to him right now in the meta. And then last up is Ramattra, and people are like, wait, what? I thought Ramattra was going to be completely busted. Turns out Ramattra is just not. Ramattra is not busted. Ramattra is not overpowered. And it really doesn't come down to anything that's wrong with Ramattra's kit. It comes down to the power level of the abilities and damage. Everything on Ramattra is kind of on the conservative side, whether it's damage, cooldowns, utility. And I could see a world where if you just buff those numbers up, Ramattra is the best tank in the game. But how it is right now, Ramattra is like, you know, quite a bit too weak. It's like if you just took Winston's damage and like reduced it by 40%, same character but reduced everything by 40% or doubled his cooldowns, he would be super weak, right? It's just because the numbers, it's not because of the character. And that's kind of the place that Ramattra's in. So I'm glad that this has happened because one, Ramattra's behind a paywall, and two, I don't want a new character being added into the game that ruins the game. So I'm perfectly fine with Ramattra being one of the worst tanks, but it's actually important to understand that even the C tier tanks right here are actually still playable, especially when we talk about the average rank. Every single tank is playable in one way or another if you're making proper decisions, so don't take this tier list to heart or anything like that. It's important to understand that all these characters can actually have huge impact over the game. Now, next up, we have DPS. And remember, DPS are gaining a increase in reload speed per kill, but we actually do not gain a movement speed increase when we get that kill anymore. So for some characters, this is going to hurt more, and other characters, it's going to hurt less. But let's first talk about the S tier. And there's 4 characters I have in the S tier: Tracer, Reaper, Echo, and Widowmaker. Now, some of these are going to shock you a little bit, but let me explain my reasoning. First off, Tracer. Tracer is getting a buff from 5 to 6. Now, keep in mind that she was pre-buffed already because of the bug that was going around that prevented the fall off. But the thing about the difference between the fall off bug and the damage increase is now Tracer's going to be able to do more damage from up close. She's going to have more fall off, or actual fall off now, so you're not going to be Sniper Tracer anymore. But being able to burst someone, one clip someone, these things are more viable now, which was one of the things I was frustrated about Tracer before. It felt like you didn't really gain a huge amount of damage increase for being up close, and now you will. You will actually feel that, so that's a big deal. Next off is Reaper. While Reaper does not get that movement increase anymore, oftentimes Reapers want to engage very close anyways, teleporting to the high ground, being proactive with their movement, or playing with a Lucio. And I do think that Reaper is still a fantastic character, capable of following up a Doom or punishing a Doom, following or punishing a Roadhog, Winston. I mean, he's just great against the tank lineup. He's really great against DPS duels. And all in all, Reaper's just a fantastic freaking pick. Now, the one you might be like, huh, is Echo. And Echo is just the biggest sleeper pick of all time. People just keep sleeping on Echo, and I don't know why, because Echo's insane. Capable of actually punishing tanks, capable of copying these tanks and being an insane threat. Like, your ultimate can be a win condition all by itself. if you're really diligent with your echo use, making sure that you save your fly away just like you would a slide to slide away from danger, you're going to be able to punish enemy tanks, make insane plays. You're one of the best characters to actually pocket with the Mercy, and all in all, Echo just kind of comes together to be a really fantastic character to master. I'm going to be doing an Echo guide soon, so make sure you stay tuned to that. Last up is Widowmaker, and Widowmaker is a character that actually benefits greatly from Sojourn not being able to one-tap her anymore. And I think a lot of people are just not respecting the Widowmaker nearly as much when they should be. Widowmaker is phenomenal. Now, I do understand that characters like Winston and Doom can pressure a Widow, but just in the 5v5 format, Widow can get value right away or play really conservative in a place that is pretty hard for them to get to or pretty hard to be dove. And of course, this character is going to really scale depending on skill level, right? I don't necessarily think that she's like an S tier DPS in gold or anything like that, but I do think that Widowmaker is going to be someone that is making an actual indention and a mark in the high ranks. And I would imagine that right now, with the top 500 being almost all Sojourns, we're going to see a good mix of Widowmakers in there for the foreseeable future. So that's why I'm putting her in the S tier. Next up, we have A. And at the top of A, guess what? Surprise, surprise, it's Sojourn. And you're like, what the heck? I thought you got a ton of nerfs. She did, but she's still good. And I think this kind of speaks to how powerful she was before. And overall, I think Sojourn's going to be like about the same, maybe even a little bit more powerful in the average rank, but just a lot weaker in the higher ranks. But still, Sojourn has so much flexibility. Just her freaking mini graviton alone. Just the fact that she can fight someone and then railgun them in the body through half the kill. I just think that Sojourn is still insane. She's so strong. She's hard to punish. She has great mobility options and burst. And even if she doesn't have crazy one-taps anymore, still one of the best DPS in the game. Next up in the A tier, we have Ashe. Ashe is actually really good. She benefits really greatly from having the more increased reload speed upon a kill. The movement speed didn't really change anything about her, but the reload really helps her. And I do think that Ashe is going to be one of the best DPS to play, especially if you have that Mercy Pocket. And of course, that Mercy Pocket is also going to be great with Sojourn because it still allows Sojourn to one-tap 200 HP heroes, which is a little unfortunate, but yeah, it is what it is. Next up, we have Junkrat. Junkrat's great in general. I think that a lot of people thought that Junkrat, including myself, thought that Junkrat would just not really make sense in a 5v5, right? But it just turned out that that was wrong. Junkrat is insane. He can punish tanks. He can one-tap people. He has great movement options, and especially up against characters like Doomfist, Winston, even Roadhog. Like, he can actually kill these unkillable tanks, which is insane when there's only one tank. If you invest both your mines and a lot of damage into a target and just straight up remove it from the battlefield, that is so much value, and you could do that with Junkrat. And yeah, Junkrat's actually sick. He's actually freaking sick. Next up is Torb. Now, I'm giving Torb a little bit of leeway here because I think that because he's so strong underneath the Diamond rank or underneath the Masters rank, he is just deserving of a higher tier, even though I do think that this counters to him and he falls off. But overall, Torb is really strong. You get so much value just from existing, and I think a lot of people sleep on this character when you just shouldn't. He's just insane, and he's going to keep being insane going forward. And next up, we have the B tier, and these are characters that are still really good, but they're not going to get as much guaranteed value as some of the higher tier characters. So first up, we have Cassidy. Cassidy is actually just capable of outputting a ton of damage. He gets a pretty big buff from the fact that the reload speed will be increased, and Cassidy's sticky mine is really like one of the most threatening things on the battlefield. I would say outside of like Roadhog Hook, mine is scary. Like, it's hella scary. And Cassidy is really good. I think he's pretty strong. Ultimately, his weakness is that he could be dove, he could be punished. It is nice that you can actually kill a Doom, catch him off guard, be able to put a lot of pressure into him. And I do think that Cassidy deserves a high B tier, although I will say that I think that most people agree with me when I want to rework to that damn sticky grenade. Like, I was a Cassidy main before, and you know, I don't really like it. I just don't like it. I just think it's kind of whack to play against. It's weird to play with. Whatever. I'm just bitching right now. I'm sorry. Next up, we have Soldier 76. I think this character is pretty strong because he can play around the map. Like, he can go by himself, take off angles, take flanks. You're guaranteed a certain amount of value on this character, but I think that your carry potential is a bit limited here. Not quite what other characters can provide, but especially with characters like Sojourn receiving a lot weaker treatment, characters like Tracer potentially seeing more play, I think that Soldier is in a decent spot, and I think that he plays pretty well with the Doomfist as well. A character that might be going for a bit more proactive plays. Soldier could take an off angle and kind of follow that up a little bit. So all in all, I think Soldier's in a pretty good spot. Next up, we have Pharah. Pharah's pretty good on certain Koth maps, especially being able to play around the high ground. And yeah, you're going to have to distance yourself really properly, play around the line of sight of a lot of the different hit scan players. And there's some maps that you're not going to be able to play a Pharah, but I do think that Pharah is a character that has an extremely high skill ceiling when mastered, and especially when we talk about like console or some of the lower ranks, you can abuse a Pharah Mercy combo to get free wins. And yeah, I think all of that combined just makes Pharah like a pretty good B tier character. Last in the B tier, we got Genji. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, this movement change actually hurts Genji quite a bit more, so it's like a brutal Genji nerf. I mean, the ammo is gonna be nice, but the only reason we care about the freaking ammo is because you nerfed the damn ammo. But yeah, I'm a bit disappointed because in the developer interview, they said Genji is fine, and he's like at that perfect 50-50 across ranks, so we don't need to change him. And, you know, I can understand the thought process, but I really do think that Genji is in a very weak state again. He kind of feels like a bit useless without people that are engaging first. Like, Genji's not going to be able to get very easy solo pickoffs to the same extent as before. And I do think that he's still fine when played with a dive or characters that want to go in. He can follow up that damage and kind of cascade the fight with momentum. But like as a solo carry pick, someone that can get valued like isolated, or playing Genji in a composition that doesn't want to go proactive and go in, like playing Genji with like a Sigma, it's just like the biggest throw ever. He's just not really that capable of getting these solo pickoffs unless your opponents are really, really making huge mistakes, that is. Next up in the C tier, we have several different characters. First up, we have Hanzo. Now, Hanzo is kind of getting the shaft here because every character kind of gets a benefit from having a reload increase, right? Or most characters do. Hanzo doesn't. He doesn't. Reload increase does not help him in any way, and he lost the movement speed. So, yeah, Hanzo was already bad, and now he's worse. They screwed Hanzo even more, and Hanzo needs buffs. Bring back Scatter Arrow. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Actually, maybe? No. Maybe? No. Okay, Hanzo is pretty poor. Unfortunately, he's not that great. He's easy to dive. He's easy to punish. He, pound for pound, is weaker than a lot of his DPS counterparts. If you're a god at Hanzo, you can make him work, but, yeah, you have to be a god, and I think that his main utility comes from his Sonic Arrow that can allow you and your team to make some sick plays, but overall, he's still a pretty weak character. Next up, we have Sombra, and the developer said that they probably over-nerf Sombra and they will buff her in the future, which I'm gonna say don't. I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. But Sombra is pretty much only a character to bring out for her utility, but the problem is when you bring her out against characters like Doom and Wrecking Ball, she doesn't do enough in the mid-fight to justify her pick. I think if you have a ton of coordination with your hacks, perhaps, but all in all, I think she's a little bit too weak to see substantial play. And when you even have Sombra mains coming out and saying that she's probably a bit too weak as well, and they don't really play her that much anymore, I think she probably needs some buffs, but as a utility character, she still has extra bits of impact here and there, and her ultimate, still one of the best in the game. Next up, we have Symmetra, who is getting quite a few changes. I think that Symmetra is really, really strong and underplayed, but I also think that there's some key weaknesses to her, especially the fact that she is weak to characters like Roadhog and weak to characters like Doomfist, that she kind of falls behind a bit. That being said, her ultimate's insane, her pick rate is really high at every single rank, and if you master her, I think you can still succeed no matter where you are. She's a very creative character, capable of transferring that creativity into impact, so yeah. She's going to be in the C tier, but she could be much higher depending on how good you are at her. And then we have Mei at the bottom of C tier, a character that I think needs buffs in one way or another. Not entirely sure the direction they should go, but her utility, her wall utility, isn't nearly as good as it was before, mainly due to the 5v5 format. Players are a lot more split. You're not getting as much wall value, walling off tanks. And yeah, I think that she can still be good if you manage your cooldowns properly and can hit your icicles consistently, but she's not going to be nearly as good as many of the top options, especially if you're playing her in an open meta. Now, last up in the D tier, and I know he's getting buffs, but it's still Bastion. Now, Bastion isn't terrible by any means. He's just vulnerable and a bit greedy for resources from your team. I think that if you have like a designated pocket and even a tank like Diva that will peel for you, then maybe you can make it work. But realistically, Bastion is just too big, too fat, too easy to punish, too easy to kill. And here's the thing. I think that if you're in some of the lower ranks and you are duoing and you can set up some combos, you can get away with playing Bastion. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be a meta tier character. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that that's a great thing. We do not want a Bastion meta, okay? Stop asking for a Bastion meta. I think people forgot how much we complained about Bastion. Just like people forgot how much they complained about Doomfist, but it's going to come right back this freaking season. Next up, we have the supports. Last but certainly not least, now, at the top tier, the S of the S, the best supports in the game, still Kiriko and Lucio. Now, remember, because of the key changes to Kiriko, her rush isn't as strong anymore, and you're not going to get as much value by being healed by Lucio, but you have more ammo with your kunai, and you're going to be able to cleanse yourself easier with your Suzu buffs. Overall, Kiriko is going to be a character that cannot heal bot nearly as much as she was before. You got away with it before, but now, if you're not going a bit more proactive, trying to get value with your kunai, you're going to be leaving a lot of value on the table. But if those things are still true, you're still bailing out your team with your Suzu, you're still going to be a great support and still amazing. And in the Hog v Hog duo mirror, Kiriko is the carry in that fight. So keep that in mind. And you also hard counter honest. So there's a lot of things that Kiriko brings to the table. She's still one of the best supports in the game. But I think Lucio edges her out a bit. Lucio's phenomenal. Not only can he rack up damage, but he has a very impactful ultimate. His speed boost is still insane with characters like Reaper, characters like Roadhog, and he can peel as well. I mean, he could just do it all. Lucio's insane. He's really strong, and I think that he's just one of the best supports, just period. Next off in the A tier, we have only one character, and it's Mercy. Now, Mercy is an interesting character because the developers have told us that outside of top 500, Mercy actually has some of the highest win rate, even higher than Kiriko outside of top 500, which means that Mercy is just a character that not only has high win percentage, but they also said that she scales higher with skill. So she's a character that some people might think, oh, she's pretty easy to play and there's not a lot of skill expression, but especially with a lot of the movement text added to the game, I think that Mercy is extremely difficult to master. And if you do, you get rewarded for it. On top of that, with a lot of the changes to some of the DPS, characters like Ashe and Sojourn really benefit from a pocket. Echo benefits from a pocket. And the res is something that you get off quite a bit with some of these isolated fights. And don't forget, now Mercy can Glock people. You have more Glock ammo. And yeah, I think Mercy's a fantastic support, and I think she's really strong. And especially with Kiriko's ultimate being nerfed quite a bit, bringing it back in line with some of the others, Mercy's ultimate actually looks a little bit decent now compared to how bad it looked before when you compared it in the head-to-head compared to Kiriko. Next up, we have B tier. These are supports that are really strong depending on who you are playing against and what teams you're playing with, but they can be countered if you're playing against certain things. So first up, we have Zen. I think Discord is underrated. It is so powerful. You can't Suzu away a Discord because he just puts it right back on. Putting a Discord on a target means that your DPS can actually kill tanks. Like a Discord on a Hog means that your cast can threaten him. Means your junk can insta him. Means your Doomfist can punish him. Putting a Discord on pretty much anybody just actually enables kill potential. It changes breakpoints. It changes everything. The problem with Zen is his fragileness, right? So when you have a meta with Doomfist flying into your backline, unless you get proper peel, it can be a little bit brutal. But I do think that giving Zen this, insane kick, allowing a Zen to potentially frag out some divers on top of him, you have a lot of potential to outplay some of your bad matchups. And against some matchups where they're kind of just poking from far away, Zen's phenomenal. So yeah, I'm putting him at the top of B tier. I think he's great. You have to learn to master him though. Next up is Ana. Ana is getting a slight buff. Her cooldown from her sleep is slightly decreased, but that's not really going to change her that much fundamentally. Ultimately, the problem with Ana is that she does get punished pretty hard from Kiriko. Kiriko just hurts Ana a lot. You feel like a lot of your value is kind of strangled by her. Because both your sleep and your nade can get cleansed by Suzu, you have to be reliably hitting both of them to get value, and oftentimes you're going to have to look for a lot of offensive pickoffs as well. I think that Ana can still be good if you're good enough, but realistically, it's hard for most people to be that good at Ana, and I do think that Ana is someone that does struggle against good Kirikos, but then again, when do you run up against good Kirikos? I think at a base level, you need to be able to confidently hit these sleep darts, especially on tanks. Like, you could live or die. If a Doomfist flies on top of you and you miss the sleep, you're probably gonna die. But for the most part, I'm gonna keep Ana in that B tier. Now, C tier, these are supports that are still good, but they fall off when you get to a certain rank, or they don't entirely fit perfectly in the meta. First off is Moira. Now, this is a character that I think can hard carry when you're like underneath the diamond rank, or even at the diamond rank, or even low masters. She's insane, but when players start to get better and more efficient, she starts to fall off a bit. She's easy to punish. There's a lot of DPS that are going to seek Amora, force that fade, and then punish her because they're not afraid of her. She doesn't burst or have any utility that can kill them very easily. So once she uses that fade, she's kind of a sitting duck. And I do think that if you're really disciplined on this character, you can still get value, but it's not going to be nearly as much value as you can get on some of the other supports that I listed up above. But if you're getting dove constantly and you're getting no peel, she's a great character to fill to or flex to in a pinch. Last up, we have Baptiste in the C tier. Baptiste is great in some ways, but weak in others. He's a pretty easy dive target, and unfortunately has a pretty bad matchup against both Hog and Doomfist, and he's actually pretty easy to dive as well. The good thing about Baptiste is he does a lot of damage, and his immortality field's insane, but he doesn't really fit that well into the meta. He's really great to play with like a poke comp with a Sigma, so in those situations, he's really good, and he's probably great with Ramatra as well. So if we ever see a Ramatra buff making Ramatra better, I think Baptiste can pair really well with Ramatra, or if people just lock Ramatra in your games, Baptiste could be a great, pairing. Regardless of how good Ramatra is, he's going to get locked. So I do think that Baptiste has a lot of individual skill, expression, and carry potential, but just how he's fitting in the meta, not nearly as good as some of the other characters. And then last off in the D bottom tier is Brig. I think that Brig can still be played well if you have someone to bodyguard on your team that you want to protect, keep a Doomfist away from them, or peel for them. But for the most part, Brig is just a little bit weak. I think that a slight buff to her could make her more viable and put her higher up, maybe in the C or B tier. But personally, I'm okay with her not being that great. But if I'm being honest, even Brig in the D tier, like, she's still pretty good. Like, the distance between the S and the D is not like a chasm at most ranks. Maybe at the highest ranks, sure, in top 500. But if the vast majority of ranks, any one of these characters on this list are viable. I want to make that clear. Like, it's a tier list, yes, but don't treat it like a Bible or anything like that. It's okay to play whatever you want to play, and you could still find success with whatever you want. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And I really want to thank each and every one of you for being part of the channel. Please follow my Twitch, because I'm going to be starting to stream consistently and pump out content as a full-time creator now. Yeah, I love each and every one of you, and I'll see you next time. Each and every one of you, and